Okay, so this is part of a series of reviews that I've been writing where I've tried to write reviews about items, media that are hard to categorize or difficult to classify. Things that don't fit proper categories. Because people like to put things in categories, and that's not always right. And it often leads to very misleading things. And among my findings was a book. I found it when I was researching one of my favorite writers, William Burroughs. And I was very surprised by this title, and you will be too. Blade Runner, a Movie by William S. Burroughs. Which, of course, I thought, well, that's funny. William Burroughs didn't write Blade Runner. I didn't even think he wrote the screenplay. And in fact, to do a little research and find out, oh, well, it's based on a book by Alan E. Norris. Like, wait, I thought Philip K. Dick wrote Blade Runner. So, of course, this warranted more research, and I actually ended up getting the book, and, well, it's a very complicated history, exactly what this book is. So rather than do a proper review of what this book is, or rather what I think of the book, is the book any good, I'm going to spend about as much time, maybe more, going into just how this book came to be. Why the Blade Runner, and also, I mean, the first clue should be Blade Runner, a movie, as opposed to Blade Runner, the movie. And I should probably have memorized this, but it's this tedious that I have to write this down, just the years involved, just the timeline. I probably should memorize it, but I'm afraid if I do, part of my soul will flee my body in terror, and this will take its place, and I'd really rather not have that happen. So, okay, we've got basically 3-4-ish people to deal with, that are the most important. That's, of course, Philip K. Dick, Alan E. Norris, William Burroughs, Ridley Scott, and the protege of Ridley Scott's named Hampton Fancher. So, okay, 5 people. But Alan E. Norris and Philip K. Dick have only one thing in common, which is that they were born the same year, 1928. And William Burroughs was born in 1914, just so you can keep track. Now, Dick and Norris were pretty different writers, and very different lifestyles. In fact, Alan E. Norris was a physician, so he didn't start his writing career till pretty late in his life. In fact, Philip K. Dick was already pretty well established by then, including in 1968 when Philip K. Dick published a story called Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. Now, this is the movie that would become Blade Runner, or rather the story that would become Blade Runner, because, well, it is a good story. Of course, it's plagued by one of the silliest titles ever, especially since it doesn't really have much to do with the story. If you've ever seen Blade Runner, you wonder, what do sheep have to do with any of this? And what do dreams have to do with it? It's all about memories. But there it was, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. And in 1974, Alan E. Norris wrote a novel called The Blade Runner. Now, The Blade Runner is about a healthcare apocalypse. It's a dystopian future, sort of like Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, only it's a healthcare apocalypse instead of a outbreak of violent androids. And Blade Runner refers to a sort of underground courier who smuggles medical instruments to private practitioners. Now, so that's 1974. Now, in 1977, of course, Star Wars came out. And that inspired Ridley Scott to look towards science fiction, because up until then he'd done The Duelists, and yeah, that was pretty much it. And he did, I think by then he might have done that Apple commercial, but that might have been a little bit later. But the point is, he was very eager to get into science fiction. So he starts optioning a bunch of science fiction properties, and one of them is Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep. And it remained on the shelf because we know in the meantime, Alan Ladd Jr. of Fox would tap Ridley Scott on the shoulder and say, hey, if you're looking for science fiction to do, and you'd like to work for us, we've got a script for you that we think you'll like. It's called Alien. And of course we know he did that, and that was 1979. Now that same year, 1979, or around that time, Alan E. Norris was trying to get The Blade Runner into a movie. Now, here's where it gets weird. William S. Burroughs is called in to write not the screenplay, not the script, but a story treatment. He basically takes the novel, condenses it, and sort of distills it and tries to make it screen-friendly. It doesn't really work, though. However, it's interesting to note that 1979, Blade Runner, a movie, is published, And one of Ridley Scott's screenwriters, a guy named Hampton Fancher, has the book, either the Burroughs interpretation or the Alan E. Norse book, and decides that Blade Runner is a pretty cool title. Doesn't make any sense, but hey, it sounds cool to get people in the theaters. So Ridley Scott, in 1982, buys from Alan E. Norse, and to an extent William Burroughs, because of a movie, the rights to the title, which I wonder what Norse would have thought of that. Like, hey, great, we're going to buy the rights to your story. Oh, no, we're not going to buy the whole thing. We're just going to buy the title. Okay. So that is how Blade Runner, the movie, got its name, from Blade Runner, a movie, from a book by an author named Alan Norse, no relation to Philip K. Dick except a shade year of birth. Okay, so how's the book itself? It's typical William Burroughs stuff. If you've read Naked Lunch, you kind of know what you're getting into here. And I really can't understand how anyone would think this would be screen-friendly, because William Burroughs is part of that whole stream of consciousness school of writing by like Jack Kerouac and Allen Ginsberg and Brian Geisen. It's not very screen-friendly. And this book is a little bit inaccessible. In fact, it keeps trying to pitch us the fact that it's a movie because it doesn't read like one. In fact, after the first scene, it doesn't have chapters, it has scenes, and even then they're not really scenes. It closes, he riffles through stills from the movie like a deck of cards. That's in italics, implying it's a stage direction. Now, I talked about the book not having chapters, or even really having scene breaks. The book doesn't have page numbers, which is a strange thing to do. And instead of chapter breaks or scene headings, we've got these weird little PowerPoint clip art inspired film strips that don't even really make a lot of sense. They're kind of just inserted willy-nilly, and they break up the little vignettes that comprise the scenes. Now, I have no idea if this is actually in the original version, because the book was published in 1979, and that one's out of print, it's difficult to find. This particular edition, which is 1999, is the 5th printing of the 2nd edition. The 2nd edition came out in 1986 and was art directed by a guy named George Mattingly. So I can only assume these were his idea, but I have no idea. But it would be interesting, though, if this was part of Burroughs' original plan. It just seems like a very tacky thing. There's no page numbers. Instead, we've got film strips, as if to tell us it's not a novel, it's a movie, even though it reads nothing like any movie script I've ever read. So it's just this strange thing that we don't really, it doesn't fit a category. And it's not all that interesting. In fact, it's actually really forgettable. And like I said, no page numbers, silly art direction, and yeah, so the only reason anybody even looks at this is because when they do a search for Blade Runner, this comes up sometimes. So if you like William Burroughs, you could probably give it a pass. If you want to introduce somebody to William Burroughs, there's better books to do it, like Naked Lunch or Exterminator or The Soft Machine. Probably Exterminator. That's one of the best books of his. But yeah, that's Blade Runner, a movie. Not to be confused with Blade Runner, the movie, by Ridley Scott, based on Philip K. Dick, who is not Alan Norse, even though they were born the same year.